The biting air of the Washington Square Park night clawed at Aisha Monroe's throat, but it was the words of her husband, Ethan, that truly froze her from the inside out. They sat on the cold iron bench, the fountain behind him glittering under the stark city lights, a brutal contrast to the darkness that had just swallowed her world whole. Aisha, a brilliant 35-year-old architect, pulled her fur-trimmed hood tighter, watching the plumes of her own shattered breath dissipate into the gloom. Ethan's voice, usually smooth and persuasive, was now a razor-sharp instrument of rejection, cutting through years of shared life. "I can't do this anymore, Aisha," he said, his gaze fixed over her shoulder, avoiding the pain he inflicted. "I need a family. A complete family. I've given you 5 years, 5 fortunes, worth of doctors and false hope. You know the truth. You are Barren, and I refuse to let your inadequacy define my future." The word barren felt like a physical blow, a scarlet letter branded onto her soul after countless invasive procedures and the quiet, crushing grief of negative test results. She remembered the hushed doctor's consultations, the way Ethan's hand would squeeze hers a little too tightly, not with comfort, but with thinly veiled resentment. She had endured the silent judgment of his traditionalist family, the empty nursery they had furnished, and the weight of failing the only man she had ever truly loved. He finally turned to face her, his eyes cold and hard like the polished stone of the fountain's basin. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. It's done. And don't think about fighting me on this," he warned, standing up and towering over her. "The prenup is ironclad, and I've already moved the majority of my liquid assets into offshore holdings that your lawyer will never touch. You'll get the house equity and your retirement savings, enough to live on, but certainly not enough to retire comfortably like you planned. You chose architecture over having a family early, and now you pay the price for that selfish choice." He straightened his expensive coat, his silhouette framed against the watchful figures of 2 small children standing near him and a man in the distance, a sight that twisted the knife of her childlessness. "This is the only way, Aisha. I deserve children, and you deserve to be alone." Aisha found Ethan 2 days later at their sprawling Upper East Side penthouse, not to beg or plead, but to finally confront the icy knot of suspicion that had been tightening in her stomach. She watched him pack a leather duffel bag, his movements too efficient, too rehearsed. The cold cruelty of his words in the park had not just ended their marriage. They had triggered a terrifying clarity. "It's not just about children, is it, Ethan?" she asked, her voice dangerously steady as she leaned against the doorway, surveying the home she had helped him build. He paused, his back stiff. "There's someone else, and you've been planning this for months, maybe years." He sighed, an exaggerated show of annoyance, and zipped the bag shut. "Fine, you want the truth? Yes, there's someone. She's younger, and she's not defective." The word defective hung in the air, slicing through her last reserves of dignity. Aisha felt a surge of white-hot rage, realizing every comforting word, every shared dream, had been a lie designed to keep her in place until he was ready to discard her. The realization that he had manipulated her deepest vulnerability, her desire for motherhood, for his own selfish exit, felt like the ultimate betrayal. She didn't cry. She just felt hollowed out, humiliated by the sheer scope of his deception. Within a week, Aisha had moved out of the penthouse and into a tiny, overpriced studio apartment in Brooklyn, a temporary prison of boxes and bare walls. She felt utterly lost, adrift from the luxurious life she had unknowingly been living on borrowed time. The contrast between the marble floors she once walked and the peeling laminate under her feet was a constant, stinging reminder of Ethan's financial control. While unpacking a box of old tax records she had insisted on keeping, a yellowed, folded envelope slipped out. It wasn't standard paperwork. It was a confidential letter from a private wealth management firm in Geneva, detailing the establishment of a trust fund and a pension plan, a plan far more substantial than the retirement savings he had grudgingly left her. The dates on the document were damning. The fund had been opened 3 years prior, just months after her last failed IVF cycle. Ethan hadn't just planned the divorce. He had quietly secured his future, using funds he swore were mutually invested, proving he had deliberately hidden the bulk of his real wealth, a financial betrayal that suddenly gave her rage a purpose. Clutching the damning document from Geneva, Aisha walked into the imposing Manhattan office of Mr. Sterling, a legendary divorce attorney known for his ruthless efficiency and his ability to dismantle powerful men. He was precisely the kind of shark she needed to fight Ethan's carefully constructed lie. After reviewing the papers, Mr. Sterling leaned back, his expression grim but focused. "Mrs. Monroe, your husband made a crucial error trying to hide this. He wanted a clean break, but he's just invited a full-scale financial war. We aren't just going for equity now, we're exposing fraud. We fight dirty, but we win big. Aisha felt a cold resolve settle over her. This was no longer about love. It was about justice and survival. Later that afternoon, needing a moment of quiet solitude before the storm, she found herself in a small, cozy coffee shop near her new apartment. She was staring blankly into a lukewarm latte, replaying Ethan's cruel words, when a deep, kind voice interrupted her despair. "Excuse me, is this seat taken? I promise not to talk your ear off unless you look like you need it." She looked up into the warm, empathetic eyes of a tall, impeccably dressed man. He introduced himself as Julian Vance. They spoke briefly about the weather and the city's pace, a simple, benign exchange, yet his presence was a brief, unexpected shelter from the emotional wreckage of her life. He listened to her vague, noncommittal answers with genuine patience, offering a smile that seemed to understand pain without needing to know its source. The respite was tragically short-lived. Stepping out of the coffee shop, feeling marginally steadier, Aisha's phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Ethan. Attached was a picture of a gold-plated baby rattle and a text that read, "The fiancée is pregnant. Congratulations on your freedom, I suppose. It's a shame you never got to use that expensive womb of yours. Some things, Aisha, are just meant to be useless." The image of the rattle and the raw venom of his final jab, a direct attack on her deepest wound, sent a fresh wave of blinding pain through her. The rage returned, mixed with a sickening sense of finality. Ethan was moving on, achieving his dream with someone else, while actively trying to destroy the woman he had discarded. The fight was on. The atmosphere in the courtroom during the first appearance felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a public execution. Ethan's defense attorney, a sleek woman named Ms. Thorne, launched an immediate and brutal offensive. She twisted Aisha's successful career as an architect into a narrative of cold, calculated ambition, portraying her as someone who prioritized blueprints over biology. Mrs. Monroe chose the sterile world of design over the warmth of a family, Ms. Thorne declared, her voice dripping with manufactured pity. She implied Aisha's emotional detachment made her unfit for anything but her professional isolation, subtly but effectively using the Barren issue to shame her publicly and undermine her claim for a fair division of assets. Aisha felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, her own lawyer, Mr. Sterling, having to remind her to remain silent through the vicious slander. That evening, desperate to wash the bitter taste of the courtroom from her mind, Aisha sought refuge in routine. She had recently begun volunteering at a local youth community center, teaching basic design concepts to teenagers after school. The simple act of helping someone build and create, of fostering budding ambition, was an antidote to the destruction of her own life. She found a quiet purpose in the chaos of the center, where value wasn't measured by her fertility, but by her knowledge and kindness. For those 2 hours, she was just Aisha, the architect, valued and respected, not the defective wife Ethan had branded her to be. It was a brief, necessary reprieve where the deep wound of her rejection could finally stop throbbing. As she left the center that night, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, Julian Vance happened to be driving slowly past in his discreet black sedan. He wasn't there by accident. The casual encounter in the coffee shop had left him more intrigued than he cared to admit. He recognized her instantly, saw the quiet dignity in her posture, despite the visible exhaustion etched on her face. Seeing her exit the community center, surrounded by thank-you notes taped to the window, Julian realized she was more than just a beautiful, sad woman he'd met in a cafe. She was someone with depth, resilience, and a quiet commitment to helping others. His professional interest suddenly became far more personal, shifting from simple curiosity to a deliberate desire to know her story. He drove away, pulling out his phone, deciding he needed to find a formal, undeniable reason to cross her path again. The morning after the court appearance, Aisha found a stark white envelope slipped under her apartment door. There was no return address, and her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside, a crudely typed message warned her to cease and desist all legal action against Ethan immediately. Drop the suit, take the settlement, and disappear. It read, "If you expose his secrets, you will regret what we exposed of yours." The implication was chilling. It wasn't just Ethan she was fighting anymore. It was a shadowy network trying to intimidate her. The fear was extreme, a cold wash of vulnerability that made her look over her shoulder on the street and double-check the lock on her flimsy door. Later that afternoon, while sorting through the last of her unpacked boxes, Aisha came across a small, worn photo album. She sat on the floor, flipping through pages of their early life, A grainy picture of her and Ethan backpacking through Europe, their faces alight with young, carefree love. A photo of him proposing on a rainy pier. A silly snapshot of them laughing hysterically while painting their first apartment. A powerful wave of confusion hit her. It wasn't all a lie. The love had been genuine once, a deep, nourishing bond. She remembered the man who used to call her his rock, the one who celebrated her first big architectural commission. The memories wrestled painfully with the reality of the cruel, calculated stranger he had become, leaving her emotionally tangled and unsure if she was fighting a monster or just the ghost of a good man. The internal conflict was interrupted by a professional call. It was Julian Vance's executive assistant, formal and precise, requesting an urgent consultation with Aisha's firm regarding a multimillion-dollar philanthropic development project. Aisha was surprised. The project was exactly the kind of high-profile, socially responsible work she had always dreamed of doing. The meeting was set for the following morning at Julian's corporate headquarters. Julian, sitting in his immaculate corner office that evening, reviewed Aisha's impressive portfolio one last time. He didn't need an architect. His firm had an entire department. But he needed a reason, a professional mask, to sit across from the woman whose quiet sadness and resilience had captivated him. The woman he now knew was embroiled in a nasty, high-stakes divorce. His calculated encounter was set, the first domino in a potentially life-changing relationship. Aisha was presenting her preliminary concepts for the philanthropic development project, feeling the weight of the high-stakes meeting, when the door to Julian Vance's opulent office burst open without warning. A whirlwind of youthful energy flooded the room. Julian's 3 children, the identical 8-year-old twins, Skylar and Leo, and 5-year-old Penelope, a tiny sprite with pigtails, tore past the stunned executive assistant. They were dressed in school uniforms, clearly having just arrived, and immediately set about turning the professional sanctuary into a playground. Skylar grabbed a ruler, proclaiming it a sword, while Leo used the edge of Aisha's carefully rendered blueprint to draw a crude, bright green alien. Penelope, oblivious to the important conversation, simply ran straight to her father and demanded a hug, with sticky hands. Julian, his face a mask of mortified apology, tried to restore order, but Aisha simply smiled, a genuine, easy smile she hadn't realized she still possessed. She didn't scold them or show irritation. Instead, she knelt down to Penelope's level and complimented the glitter glued to her backpack. When Leo complained that the conference table was boring, Aisha quickly grabbed a marker and a large sheet of blank paper, inviting him to draw the alien invasion in the corner of the room so he wouldn't destroy her work. She spoke to the children with instinctive warmth, her movements gentle and patient, seamlessly transforming the chaos into creative engagement. Julian watched, mesmerized, seeing the barren label Ethan had placed on her utterly crumble in the face of her natural, nurturing grace. Once the assistant finally ushered the children out, Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished mahogany table. The weight of his deception, now compounded by Aisha's pure reaction to his family, became too much to bear. His voice was low, laced with sincerity. Aisha, I have to be honest with you. This project, it's real, but your consultation wasn't. Not exactly. We have excellent architects. I orchestrated this meeting entirely because I wanted to see you again. I wanted to know the woman I met in the coffee shop, the woman volunteering at the center. I saw the pain in your eyes that day, and I needed to understand why. I apologize if this jeopardizes your time or your trust, but I needed an introduction that wasn't another chance encounter. The raw, vulnerable confession hung between them, instantly dissolving the professional facade and threatening to derail everything she had hoped to gain from this high-level opportunity. The consequences of Julian's vulnerable confession were swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, Aisha's divorce lawyer, Mr. Sterling, received a package filled with glossy, damning photographs. The images showed Aisha and Julian talking intently in his office, their heads close, framed to suggest intense intimacy, and another shot of her smiling down at his children. Ethan, having hired a ruthless private detective, had seized upon the fabricated meeting, twisting the professional consultation and Aisha's natural kindness toward the children into proof of a long-standing, illicit affair. The narrative presented to the court was that Aisha had prematurely moved on and was now seeking financial gain to support a new, wealthy lifestyle, a complete misrepresentation of the truth, but potent enough to poison the court's perception of her case. Faced with this new legal attack, Julian insisted on immediate transparency. He invited Aisha to his home that evening, a quiet estate far removed from the city's prying eyes. It was there, sitting by a roaring fire, that Aisha finally shed the layers of her pain and told him the entire truth. The years of silent struggle, the expensive, failed treatments, the ultimate, crushing rejection by Ethan for being barren. Julian didn't interrupt, his gaze steady, filled not with pity, but a profound, quiet empathy. When she finished, he shared his own heartache, revealing that his beloved wife, Clara, the mother of Skylar, Leo, and Penelope, had passed away 3 years prior after a short, vicious illness. He spoke of the loneliness of single parenthood, how every decision was filtered through the lens of their happiness, and how the absence of their mother was a constant ache. "Aisha," he said softly, taking her hand, "I chose a life with 3 amazing children. Your capacity to nurture, your kindness, that is all the fertility I care about. What Ethan called defective, I see as pure strength." The emotional intimacy of that conversation was immediately overshadowed by the legal fallout. The following morning, Ethan's lawyer, armed with the misleading photographs, successfully filed an injunction against the portion of assets Aisha was currently holding, including the small bank account containing her professional savings and the equity from their home. The filing claimed that given her suspected extramarital relationship, she posed a financial flight risk and was potentially attempting to hide marital assets through a third party. The new extreme event hit her hard. She was virtually penniless again, legally blocked from accessing her own funds, proving that Ethan was willing to use any lie necessary to destroy her. The extreme isolation Aisha felt was intensified when her best friend, Chloe, staged a sudden, venomous intervention. Chloe arrived at Aisha's small apartment, brandishing a printout of the detective's photos, her face tight with anger. "Aisha, what is this? 2 weeks after the split, and you're already cozying up to a billionaire and his kids? You look thrilled. Did you use Ethan for the money, just to trade up?" The accusation stung more than any of Ethan's cruelties, precisely because it came from the one person whose judgment she truly valued. Aisha tried to explain the context, the fake consultation, the legal setup, Julian's sincerity, but Chloe was blinded by the visuals and the speed of events. They devolved into a massive, heartbreaking argument, ending with Chloe throwing the photos onto the floor and storming out, convinced Aisha was prioritizing her new, wealthy life over their 20 years of friendship. Seeking to provide a break from the constant legal and emotional warfare, Julian arranged a quiet Saturday outing. It wasn't a lavish event, just a trip to the local natural history museum, followed by lunch at a simple park cafe. For the first time, Aisha experienced the wonderful, chaotic normalcy of family life. She wasn't an interviewer or a babysitter. She was just part of the unit. She helped Penelope zip her jacket, mediated a loud argument between the twins about dinosaurs versus mummies, and laughed uncontrollably when Leo smeared chocolate on his nose. In those ordinary, messy moments, she realized the emptiness Ethan had condemned her to was being filled with genuine connection and warmth. She felt a peaceful acceptance of her new role, a sense of belonging that was far more valuable than any asset Ethan could hoard. The calm of the weekend was shattered by a headline Mr. Sterling sent to Aisha on Monday morning. Julian, using his considerable influence and network, had publicly and decisively terminated a major, highly anticipated partnership with one of Ethan's key overseas investors. The reason given was vague, a sudden lack of confidence in ethical standards, but the message was loud and clear. Julian was flexing his financial muscle to subtly protect Aisha by crippling Ethan's business prospects. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was a targeted, powerful act of financial revenge and protection. The extreme event was a relief, showing Aisha that she wasn't alone in this fight, but it simultaneously escalated the war, making Julian an undeniable target of Ethan's fury. The ongoing legal skirmish led Mr. Sterling to uncover a damning electronic trail. Hidden within Ethan's mother's private email server, they found drafts and communications related to the anonymous, threatening letter Aisha had received weeks prior. The discovery was an extreme revelation. Ethan's mother, Evelyn, the woman who had always treated Aisha with polite, cold distance, was the true orchestrator of the intimidation. She had used her own wealth and network to try and frighten Aisha into submission, proving the hatred for Aisha's childlessness ran deep and was a generational scheme. The betrayal, coming from the matriarch of the family, solidified Aisha's understanding that her rejection was fueled not just by Ethan's selfishness, but by a systemic, calculated cruelty. To distract from the legal intensity, Aisha spent her evenings focused on Julian's children. She began designing a spectacular, imaginative playhouse for their expansive garden, turning the project into a collaborative effort. Leo insisted on a secret trapdoor, Skylar sketched intricate star charts on the ceiling, and Penelope simply demanded bright pink paint everywhere. Working with them, sketching out their wild ideas, and turning them into reality, fostered a deep and nurturing bond. Aisha found profound joy in realizing their dreams, feeling the truth of her natural maternal instincts confirmed, not through biology, but through shared creation and unconditional affection. This less extreme event was an anchor of pure, uncomplicated love. The peace was shattered late one afternoon when Ethan unexpectedly showed up at the architectural firm where Aisha was now freelancing. He looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled, and his eyes blazing with a dangerous desperation. He shoved past the startled receptionist and cornered Aisha in the hallway. "What the hell did you do, Aisha?" he hissed, his voice low and vibrating with contained rage. "Julian Vance just ruined the Cairo deal. You told him, didn't you? You weaponized my finances just because I wanted a real family." Ethan, realizing that Julian was not just a passing fling but a formidable, protective opponent, issued a final, desperate threat. "If you don't back off and stop involving your new sugar daddy, I will make sure your career is blacklisted across the entire Eastern Seaboard. You have no idea what I'm capable of." The direct, terrifying confrontation brought the conflict to an undeniable fever pitch. The final divorce hearing was the explosive climax Aisha had both dreaded and anticipated. Mr. Sterling, armed with the Swiss documents and the evidence of Evelyn's malicious interference, systematically tore apart Ethan's carefully constructed narrative of victimhood. The moment of extreme justice arrived when Ethan took the stand. Under relentless cross-examination, facing the undeniable facts of his hidden assets and his lies, he finally cracked. His voice thick with shame, he admitted that the Barren excuse was a convenient cover. "It wasn't just about having children," he mumbled, his eyes darting away from Aisha's steady gaze. "It was about finding someone younger, someone who wouldn't challenge my business decisions, and securing my wealth without interference. Aisha was always too smart, too capable." The confession, though muffled, was heard by the court, legally confirming that her rejection was fueled by his greed and betrayal, not her infertility. A week later, the final judgment arrived. Thanks to Mr. Sterling's expert maneuverings and Julian's subtle, indirect influence, primarily through making Ethan's financial instability a matter of public record, the settlement was surprisingly favorable to Aisha. She received not only the equity and her original retirement savings, but also a substantial portion of the assets Ethan had attempted to hide in the Geneva accounts, rightfully recognizing her contribution to their marital estate. She was financially free, no longer beholden to Ethan's control, a profound sense of relief washing over her. That evening, the joy of financial freedom was complicated by an intensely emotional confrontation. Aisha was at Julian's home, having a quiet discussion with him in the library about the day's events. Unbeknownst to them, the children, Skylar, Leo, and Penelope, were listening from the hallway, their faces serious. As Aisha turned to leave, the three children blocked her path. Skylar, the most articulate, spoke first, his voice small but firm. "Dad said you're not his friend anymore. You're his partner," he said. Then Penelope, clutching her favorite stuffed animal, looked up with wide, hopeful eyes. "If you're the partner, does that mean you're going to be our new mommy? Because we really, really want you to be." The question, fueled by the children's desperate desire for a stable maternal presence, put an extreme and sudden emotional pressure on Aisha, forcing her to confront the deepest question of her life. Was she ready to step into the role of mother, not by birth, but by choice and love? The extreme event that followed the children's poignant question arrived on Aisha's doorstep in the form of an unexpected and incredibly awkward visitor, Ethan's new fiancée, a woman named Sienna. Sienna stood there, teary-eyed and hesitant, not to issue threats, but to offer a shocking apology. She admitted she had seen the cruel text Ethan sent Aisha, the one mocking the baby rattle, and had begun to see a pattern of manipulation. "He told me you were cold and obsessed with money," Sienna confessed, twisting a tissue in her hands. "But now I see how he twists everything. He's controlling, and he uses the baby against me, just like he used your infertility against you. I realize now that he didn't leave you for being barren. He left you because you were strong enough to fight him." Her revelation was a painful validation, proving Aisha had been right all along, and offering an unexpected, necessary empathy from the person Aisha might have expected to hate most. Needing space to absorb the complex emotions of the divorce judgment and the children's sincere plea, Aisha took a spontaneous, less extreme solo trip to a secluded cabin upstate. It was a pilgrimage of self-healing. Alone in the quiet woods, away from the city's noise and Julian's compelling presence, she finally processed the years of suppressed trauma. She didn't mourn the biological child she couldn't have, She embraced the profound, unconditional love she felt for Skylar, Leo, and Penelope. In the solitude, she realized her identity wasn't defined by what her body couldn't do, but by her immense capacity to love and nurture. The answer to the children's question became clear. She was ready to be their mother, heart and soul, without the necessity of biology. Just as she was returning, centered and resolute, the news broke in the financial press. Ethan's real estate development company was facing a sudden, catastrophic collapse. This wasn't Julian's doing. It was the result of a past, incredibly shady land deal that had finally caught up with him, triggering an investigation and immediate liquidation. The new extreme event was a brutal, swift consequence of Ethan's inherent dishonesty. It was financial karma that went far beyond the divorce court, proving his entire foundation was built on lies, and his ruin was completely self-inflicted. The man who had judged her for her supposed failure was now facing a total, public failure of his own making. The extreme test of Aisha's commitment arrived late on a Tuesday night when a vicious stomach flu swept through the Vance household. All three children, Skylar, Leo, and Penelope, succumbed simultaneously. Julian, though worried sick, was temporarily incapacitated by a minor surgery he'd had earlier that week. Aisha immediately stepped into the void. She spent the entire night moving between bedrooms, changing linens, administering medicine, and offering calm, gentle comfort. She held Penelope until the shiver stopped, read Leo a soothing story despite his protests, and quietly replaced Skylar's feverish damp cloth every hour. By dawn, she was exhausted but focused, the crisis cementing her role not as a girlfriend or partner, but as a devoted, primary caregiver. She performed the duties of a mother without hesitation, the experience solidifying her bond with the children in a profound, indelible way. The next day, the less extreme, but equally demanding, challenge appeared. Julian's in-laws, Eleanor and Harrison, Clara's parents, arrived for an unannounced visit. They were stately, traditional, and instantly cool toward Aisha. They observed her with thinly veiled scrutiny, clearly questioning the presence of a new woman so soon after their daughter's death, and openly doubting Aisha's intentions, especially given the rumors of her recent, high-profile divorce. Over a tense afternoon tea, Eleanor fixed Aisha with a penetrating gaze. "We care only about the children, Ms. Monroe," she stated formally. "We need to know that you are here for the right reasons, and that you are not simply replacing our Clara, or chasing Julian's name." The question was direct, demanding, and the new extreme challenge Aisha had to face. She didn't become defensive or offer platitudes. Instead, she looked Harrison and Eleanor squarely in the eyes and spoke with absolute, unwavering honesty. "I loved my husband, and I failed to give him what he wanted, which led to a painful divorce," she admitted simply, referencing the barren truth without shame. "I am not here to replace Clara. No one can do that. I am here because I love your grandchildren, and I love Julian. I am here because I found my purpose in this family. My history means I know exactly what it means to be rejected, and I would never inflict that on them or on Julian. My intentions are not financial. They are entirely centered on providing stability and unconditional love." Her vulnerability and grace, devoid of any attempt to impress, finally cut through their skepticism. Harrison, a man of few words, gave a single, slow nod, granting Aisha a moment of grudging, quiet respect that was harder won than any court victory. Julian led Aisha to the newly finished playhouse in the garden, a small architectural marvel born from their shared love and the children's wild imagination. Inside, with the evening light filtering through the star-charted ceiling and the pink walls, Julian dropped to one knee. This was the extreme climax of love, a moment unburdened by diamonds or spectacle, but weighted with profound commitment. He wasn't proposing marriage with a ring, but a deep, permanent partnership. "Aisha Monroe, I love you," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I watched you care for my children when they were sick. I watched you face my in-laws with the kind of honesty I've rarely seen. You are the architect of this family's future, and your past is irrelevant. We already have the family I need, and you are the heart of it. Will you be my permanent partner in life and in raising Skylar, Leo, and Penelope?" The proposal wasn't about a biological bond, but a choice of the heart, validating everything Ethan had rejected her for. Later that week, Aisha received a tearful, contrite call from her best friend Chloe. The less extreme event was an essential step toward emotional recovery. Chloe had seen the news about Ethan's business collapse and realized the truth of Aisha's earlier words about betrayal and manipulation. "Aisha, I was wrong, utterly wrong," Chloe sobbed. "I let the photos and my own stupid envy cloud my judgment. I am so sorry I didn't trust you, and I am so incredibly proud of you. Please, tell me everything about your new life and your incredible family." The reunion was a cleansing moment, restoring a friendship that had been a casualty of Ethan's lies, and bringing Aisha a deep sense of peace that her chosen family was now embraced by her original one. The restoration of friendship was immediately followed by a jarring, new extreme confrontation. A handwritten letter arrived from Ethan, postmarked from a cheap motel near the city limits. The successful, arrogant man who had discarded her was utterly humbled and exposed. The letter detailed his complete financial ruin, the loss of his reputation, and the departure of his pregnant fiancée, Sienna, who had finally seen his true nature. The letter ended with a desperate, pathetic plea. He wasn't apologizing for his cruelty. He was begging Aisha, the woman he had called defective and barren, for financial help, asking her to loan him a substantial amount from the divorce settlement she had so recently won. His arrogance had turned to desperation, providing Aisha with the final, ultimate test of her character and kindness. Aisha read Ethan's desperate letter, holding the soiled paper with a feeling of profound pity, not triumph. This was the moment of extreme reckoning, the final test of her character. She didn't seek revenge. She sought closure. She met Ethan in a neutral, public park, the same park where he had cruelly discarded her months before. He looked small and defeated, the shadow of the man who had wielded wealth and judgment. She returned the letter to him. "I won't give you the money, Ethan," she said, her voice firm but devoid of malice. "I could destroy you, but that's not who I am. Instead, I'll give you a lesson in kindness, the one you forgot. The settlement money I fought for represents my self-reliance and my worth, things you tried to take away. You have the intellect and health to rebuild your life. Find that strength and stop looking for someone else to save you. That is the only compassionate thing I can offer." She left him there, not in anger, but in empathy, finally closing the door on that painful chapter. A few weeks later, the less extreme event brought pure joy. Julian, the children, and Aisha moved into their new house, a stunning, light-filled structure that Aisha had designed specifically for their blended family. It wasn't just a building. It was a tangible symbol of their fresh start. Every angle, every window, reflected her vision for a future defined by unity and warmth. The children immediately claimed their new rooms, Penelope demanding the pink playhouse be relocated to the garden, and Julian watched Aisha move through the spaces she had created, utterly at home, her presence grounding and beautiful. The house was the physical manifestation of her acceptance and belonging. Just as she was settling into this beautiful, chosen reality, a new extreme element of choice arrived in the mail. It was a letter from a prestigious, cutting-edge fertility clinic she had once researched, offering her enrollment in a new, highly experimental procedure with incredible success rates. She was precisely the right candidate, and thanks to the settlement, she could now easily afford the substantial cost. The letter dangled a miraculous possibility, the chance to fulfill her original biological dream. Aisha held the paper, the final, tangible resolution of the Barren identity placed directly in her hands. She had the means to try again, or she could completely accept the life she had already built, the love she already had, the children who already called her partner. The choice was hers, defining whether she would chase the past or fully embrace the present. Aisha held the fertility clinic letter, turning it over in her hands, her gaze drifting out to the garden, where Skylar and Leo were attempting to teach Penelope how to climb the rope swing attached to the new playhouse. The extreme final choice weighed heavily, yet the answer was already radiating from the life she had built. She slid the paper into the fireplace, watching the possibility of a biological child curl into ash. She realized the ultimate freedom wasn't the ability to conceive, but the ability to choose. She chose the heart she already had, full and running over. Julian walked in, observing her quiet resolve. He sat beside her, gently taking her hand. "I've filed the papers, Aisha," he announced, his eyes shining. "I've decided to retire from a CEO position. The kids need a father, and you and I deserve to build this life together without the constant demands of the world. It's time to focus entirely on family." 1 year later, the scene was one of less extreme, yet profound, domestic bliss. It was a sun-drenched Saturday morning in their new home. Aisha was no longer just a partner. She was Mamsha, a nickname the children had lovingly invented. Julian was coaching Leo's soccer team. Eleanor and Harrison were frequent visitors, and Chloe was the godmother of chaos at every birthday party. The house echoed with the sound of their blended family's love and laughter. Aisha was thriving, not just as a mother figure, but as a celebrated architect who now took on only projects that inspired her, working from her spacious home studio. She was complete, her life defined by purpose and chosen bonds. The new extreme and poetic final encounter occurred one chilly autumn afternoon in downtown Manhattan. Aisha was crossing a bustling avenue, her hand firmly holding Penelope's, while Skylar and Leo raced ahead, their backpacks bouncing. She was laughing at one of Leo's terrible jokes, her face radiant with a happiness that was effortless and true. As she reached the curb, she glanced across the street and saw him, Ethan. He was waiting at a bus stop, wearing an ill-fitting coat, his face gaunt, holding a wrinkled newspaper that hinted at his struggle. He saw her, too, and the recognition that flashed in his eyes, a mix of regret, shock, and profound loss, was unmistakable. He was utterly alone, the man who had traded true love for greed and superficiality. Aisha paused for just a beat, not to gloat, but to acknowledge the shared history and the lessons learned. She offered him a small, empathetic, and utterly peaceful nod, a silent communication that she forgave him, not for him, but for her own soul's freedom. Then she turned her back on the past, tucking Penelope closer, and walked away into the noise and joy of her fulfilled, beautiful, and chosen life, never looking back.